Chapter 3, The Art of Being Timeless. Welcome back to the Jeremiah Show. Foreign correspondent Ivor Davis was embedded with the Beatles on their triumphant 1964 North American tour. He was the only daily newspaper reporter to travel with them from start to finish. Rock and roll history. Crisscrossing North America on their private jet. In limo number 2, Ivor sped from airport to hotel, from venue to venue, and was given astonishing 24/7 access to John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. He was also George's ghostwriter. And in his award-winning 60th anniversary book, The Beatles and Me on Tour, Ivor dishes up new, riveting, funny, behind-the-scenes stories that only an insider knows. Welcome back, Ivor.
Thank you. Thank you.
So before we talk about the book, I wanted to ask, because your career has spanned decades and you've covered, I mean, you can give a couple of the highlights of, if you can call them that. I mean, you've been in really great situations. You've been in some scary situations, but you've been there kind of in the front lines and some of these really big milestones in history. You were right there. And time, what does it mean to you? I think it's the most important thing that we have. It's often neglected and not respected. Things happen. You live or you don't live as a person, but you are the definition of somebody who lives, who gets involved, who is there on the front lines, and you've captured time. And I was just curious, what time? How often do you think about it? What does it mean to you as being a writer, as a journalist? What are your thoughts on time?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I'll tell you why. Because when you are doing these stories, when I was in the kitchen at the Ambassador Hotel the night Bobby Kennedy was shot and murdered by Sirhan, I just covered the story. I didn't have the ability to say, this is history before my very eyes. You don't do that. You Some people do. I mean, I remember Richard Burton wrote a diary about his adventures with Elizabeth Taylor, and he kept a diary, went home and wrote it down. And that is fascinating. As a reporter, I didn't have time to do it. As soon as the Beatle trip was over, I went on to the next big story, which was the Warren Commission report on the assassination of John Kennedy. So you almost come up for air and quickly get on to the next story. I wish I'd been more retrospective in my life, but now I'm trying to be it now that I'm an old geezer. So that's part of the thing. And the same with the Beatles, because why did I revisit the Beatles this year? And I don't know, I don't know if I've answered your question, but I would tell many of your viewers and listeners that write it down, keep a diary for God's sake, because and put down your mood and your feeling and your effervescence, and
Hmm.
your excitement. Put it all down, because it's very hard sometimes to recapture that.
I
And
was thinking, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, so I was going to say, Jeremiah, I don't know, may I read a short bit that is in my new book? The introduction is to why I wrote this book again, revisiting the Fab Four.
Yes, please do. But before you do, can you answer one more a follow-up question to what you just said? Is context a part of time, and meaning the different experiences that you've had, including the one you're about to read to us? Does it change? Do you find that it changes? It kind of bends and warps a little bit with context and time, the time we're in today versus the time you were in there, the actual time that the event happened. Is context a big part of time and
Well,
how
yes,
it's
I mean, it does. I
repeated
mean,
and
if you talk to anybody, again, that's a fascinating insight into the human mind. Because if you think about things that happened to you at the time, you live the time, and then it's not until maybe 10 years later of a certain incident in your life that you replay it and you say, hey, I should have done this, or why didn't I do this? And now with the maturity of age, I can see this incident in my life with much more clarity. And I think
mm-hmm.
it's what they call getting older.
Mm. Okay, thank you. Please read from The Beatles and Me on Tour, the 60th anniversary re-released edition. Like read from that and then just tell us, like, tease us a little bit. What can we expect with this new
Well, I
re-release?
mean, what it is my maturity of 10 years later, the fact that I've become enmeshed in the Beatles even more today than I did back in 60 years ago, as hard as it seems, because the Beatles are everywhere. There's no other group like them. So I'm just going to read this little bit, if I may, which may explain why I revisited it again. So here we are, 60 years on, and there is no other rock group in music history who have so indelibly imprinted their music on our collective minds and pocketbooks. The 60s, of course, heralded what was labeled the British invasion. The Limeys kept coming, the Animals, the Kinks, the Who, the Zombies, the Yardbirds, the Searchers, the Rolling Stones, the Dave Clark Five, Jerry and the Pacemakers, Herman's Hermits, Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas, and on and on and on. No one, except for the Rolling Stones, achieved anything like the Beatles' durability and overwhelming acclaim and longevity. And one other little addition, if I may add, I said in 2019, I watched a far-fetched but intriguing romantic movie called Yesterday from British director Danny Boyle and writer Richard Curtis. Now, I bring this up because its storyline was unthinkable. During a 12-second global power outage, the world wakes up to universal amnesia about the Fab Four. They have been wiped clean from all memories as though they never ever existed. Internet searches turn up only details of insects, and that means the world has no memory of any Beatles song. Zilch, nothing. And in the film, Jack Malik, a struggling British musician, quickly realizes he is the lone person on the planet who remembers the Beatles and their songbook. So with great trepidation, he introduces Beatles songs to the world to amazing acclaim. The very idea of never having Beatles songs in our memory banks or our lives is totally unimaginable, repugnant even.
That is
So
a good
what would we
movie.
do without the Beatles music?
Yeah. That I just wrote that down yesterday. That is
Did you
actually a great
did you
movie.
ever see that
I
film?
did. That's great. I'm gonna watch it again tonight. I was looking for something to watch. Just wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. Thank you, Ivor, for reading from your book, The Beatles and Me on Tour, the 60th anniversary edition. Check that out. You can get that now. It's out everywhere that you buy books. You can go to Ivor books.com. We're coming up to our last segment, unfortunately. I know Ivor's off to something else. He's always off to something else. Ivor, it's been a great hour. We got a few more minutes. Don't go anywhere. We're going to find out a couple of interesting things about Ivor before we let him go. In chapter 5, sorry, it's chapter 4. I'm skipping ahead already. Chapter 4, Jazz on the Autobahn. Go to
Well,
Ivor
I
Davis.
like the way you. I love the way you've done it with. We're not recording, are we now? I love the
No, we're
way
still
you've done
recording.
it. What?
I was going to read a promo for your book before we went to
Okay,
break. Are
sorry.
we
I was
still
going to say, I
recording?
love the way that you've done the chapters. That's great. Yeah.
Okay. I've got music when this all comes together and finally produced and the edition that everybody's listening to right now has music from your beautiful wife and from you, Ivor, that you've given me. So you've chosen the soundtrack a little bit here. And then I've thrown in a few songs of my own.
Thank you.
One of them is the final chapter, chapter 4, the Jazz on Autobahn. It has incredible lyrics, and it's going to be the final song that we go out with. I think you'll enjoy it, Ivor. IvorDavisBooks.com, The Devil and My Friend, the inside story of a Malibu murder by Ivor Davis with Sally Ogle Davis. I'm going to give you a little hint if you haven't, a little recap here of the book. If you haven't, if you're just joining us, Ivor and Sally Davis were horrified when their Malibu neighbors, Verna Roehler and her son, Doug, died in a terrible boating accident. And the nightmare only continued when her husband, their friend, Fred Roehler, was arrested and then convicted for their murder. As investigative writers, Ivor and Sally Ogle set out hoping to find Roehler innocent, but instead they found a viper's nest of deceit and murder. You're going to be intrigued, fascinated, even horrified by The Devil and My Friend, the inside story of a Malibu murder. It's out on May 7th. You can get it now on Amazon or at ivordavisbooks.com. You can pre-order. Do that now. And we will be right back with a final segment with our good friend Ivor Davis.